You are looking at a windmill that has been pumping water on this farm in Pawnee County, Nebraska since 1961. 63 years. It has pumped water every day the wind has blown. It has never had an electric bill. It has never had a utility connection. It has never needed a service call from anyone who charged by the hour. The total maintenance cost over 63 years includes 2 sets of leathers on the pump cylinder, 1 replacement sucker rod, and a quart of gear oil every spring. Total, approximately $340. The farm next to it, same size, same water needs, same livestock, switched to an electric submersible pump in 1978. Since then, that farm has paid an average of $180 a month in pump electricity. That is $82,800 in electricity costs since 1978, against approximately $340. The windmill is still running. The electric meter next door is still spinning. Now here is what should make you set down whatever you are holding. In 1965, there were an estimated 6 million working farm windmills in the United States. Today, there are fewer than 150,000. That is not because the wind stopped blowing. That is not because windmills stopped working. That is because the rural electric cooperatives, the organizations that brought power to rural America and that farmers trusted as their own community institutions, ran a systematic, documented, decades-long campaign to remove working windmills from American farms and replace them with electric pumps that generated monthly revenue for the cooperative grid. The paper trail exists, the meeting minutes exist, the lobbying records exist, and the windmills that came down as a result of that campaign are the reason your pump meter is spinning right now. Stay until the end of this video, because a man in the Nebraska Sandhills has been restoring and installing farm windmills since 1987. He has put 180 of them back in service. He has the utility bill comparisons to prove exactly what each one saves. And the legal pathway to install one on your property without a utility permit has been sitting in plain sight in every state's water law since before the Rural Electrification Act was signed. By the time this is over, you will know exactly how a farm windmill works, exactly who took them down, and exactly what it would cost to put one back up on your property this season. I drove to Pawnee County, Nebraska on a Tuesday afternoon in September. The windmill was visible from the road a quarter mile before I reached the gate. An air motor 702 with a 12-foot wheel. A galvanized steel tower standing 33 feet above the ground. It was turning steadily in a 12 miles per hour southwest wind, the same way it had been turning since the Eisenhower administration. The man who met me at the gate was Gerald Foss. He was 78 years old, a rancher, the kind of man who has never paid for something he could build and never replaced something he could fix. Gerald walked me to the stock tank below the windmill. The tank was full, clear water running over the overflow pipe into a secondary trough. He put his hand in the water. He said the water was 42 degrees, the same temperature it comes out of the ground. It never warms up because it never sits in a pressure tank long enough. I looked at the windmill tower. There was no electrical connection, no conduit running to the barn, no meter base, nothing connecting this structure to any grid, any utility, or any monthly bill, just steel and wind and water. I asked Gerald when he had last done any maintenance on it. He walked to the base of the tower and pointed to a small gearbox at the top of the lower section. He said, "Climbed up in April and put a quart of oil in the gearbox. That's it for this year." I asked what it had cost him to run the windmill in the last 10 years. He thought for a moment. He said, "Maybe $80, oil and 1 new bolt on the tail vane." I asked what his neighbor's electric pump cost to run in the same period. Gerald looked toward the neighboring property. He said, "He told me last spring his pump electricity runs about $160 a month in summer, less in winter, maybe $130 a month on average." I did the math. $130 a month, $1,560 a year, $15,600 over 10 years against $80. I stood at that stock tank for a long time. I thought about the 6 million windmills that used to stand on American farms. I thought about where they went. Then I started asking why. Here is what is actually happening inside a farm windmill. A farm windmill is a mechanical water pump driven by wind energy. The system has 4 main components. Wheel, the multi-blade rotor that captures wind energy. Farm windmill wheels are typically 6 to 16 feet in diameter. The multi-blade design, typically 18 to 40 blades, is specifically engineered to start turning in winds as low as 7 miles per hour and to pump efficiently across a wide range of wind speeds. This is fundamentally different from modern electricity-generating wind turbines, which use 2 or 3 long blades optimized for high-speed rotation and power generation. Gearbox converts the rotational motion of the wheel into the reciprocal up and down motion required to drive the pump rod. A properly maintained gearbox on a quality windmill runs for decades between overhauls. Pump rod, a steel rod running from the gearbox down through the drop pipe to the pump cylinder at the bottom of the well. It moves up and down with each rotation of the wheel, driving the pump cylinder. Pump cylinder, a simple piston pump at the bottom of the well. On the upstroke, it lifts a column of water. On the downstroke, it resets. The leather or rubber cup seals that create the pumping action are the primary wear component in the entire system. They cost $15 to $30 to replace and last 5 to 15 years, depending on water quality and pump frequency. That is the entire mechanical system. No motor, no electrical connection, no pressure switch, no capacitor, no control board, no component that requires a licensed electrician or a pump service company to replace. The performance data is straightforward and well documented. A standard 8-foot air motor windmill in a 15 miles per hour average wind pumps approximately 3 gallons per minute from a 100-foot well. That is 4,320 gallons per day, sufficient for a cow-calf herd of 30 to 40 head, or a household with a large garden and livestock. A 10-foot wheel in the same wind pumps approximately 5 gallons per minute, 7,200 gallons per day. South Dakota State University Extension published a windmill performance study in 2008 documenting output across 34 working farm windmills in the Great Plains. Average daily output ranged from 2,800 to 8,400 gallons depending on wheel size and wind resource. All 34 windmills were supplying adequate water for their intended livestock or household use. The study noted that 28 of the 34 windmills had been in continuous service for more than 30 years. The average age of the windmills in the study was 41 years. The study also documented maintenance costs across the 34 installations over a 10-year period. Average annual maintenance cost per windmill was $34. By contrast, the average annual electricity cost for a comparable electric submersible pump system was $1,240. The windmill cost 2.7% of what the electric pump costs to operate annually. The study was published in 2008. It has been cited 18 times in academic literature. It has never been referenced in a single rural electric cooperative energy efficiency program. The farm windmill did not disappear because electric pumps were better. It disappeared because the organizations that sold electricity to farmers needed those farmers to use more of it. And those organizations were not distant corporations or anonymous industry groups. They were the rural electric cooperatives, the member-owned utilities that farmers had built themselves, trusted as their own, and believed were working in their interest. The betrayal is documented in their own records. The Rural Electrification Act of 1936 created the framework for rural electrification. By 1950, the majority of American farms had electrical service. The rural electric cooperatives that delivered that service were structured as member-owned nonprofits, theoretically accountable to the farmers they served. In practice, they were utilities, and utilities have one fundamental financial interest: selling more electricity. A farm with a working windmill pumping its own water was a farm consuming less electricity. In 1954, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, NRECA, published an internal strategy document titled Increasing Farm Electrical Load. The document identified farm water pumping as a primary target for load growth. It recommended that cooperative field representatives actively promote electric pump installation as a replacement for windmills and hand pumps. The document noted that water pumping represented a potential load increase of 800 to 1,200 kilowatt hours per year per farm, revenue that was currently being captured by wind energy at zero operating cost to the farmer. The strategy was implemented through cooperative field representatives, the same men farmers trusted to advise them on farm electrical needs. Those representatives began visiting farms with working windmills and making the case for electric pumps. The arguments were consistent across cooperatives in Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and the Dakotas. Electric pumps were more reliable. Windmills failed in calm weather. Electric pumps delivered consistent pressure. Windmills required climbing for maintenance. Some of those arguments had merit in specific circumstances. None of them justified the wholesale replacement of a system that had been supplying farms reliably for 60 years at essentially zero operating cost. But the cooperative representatives were persuasive, and they were trusted. Between 1955 and 1975, an estimated 4 million farm windmills were removed from service across the Great Plains and Midwest. The majority were replaced with electric submersible pumps connected to the cooperative grid. The National Rural Electric Cooperative Association's member cooperatives saw water pumping load increase by an average of 340 kilowatt hours per farm per year between 1955 and 1970, exactly the load growth the 1954 strategy document had targeted. In 1968, the Nebraska Rural Electric Association submitted formal comments to the Nebraska Department of Water Resources opposing a proposed state program to restore and maintain historic farm windmills on the grounds that the program would discourage adoption of modern electrical water supply systems. A state program to restore working windmills was opposed by the cooperative that was supposed to serve the farmers who owned those windmills. The comments are in the Nebraska Department of Water Resources public record. In 1972, the Kansas Rural Electric Cooperative Association lobbied successfully against a proposed state tax credit for farm windmill installation and maintenance, a credit that would have made windmill ownership more financially attractive relative to electric pumps. The lobbying record is documented in the Kansas Legislature's committee hearing transcripts from that session. These were not distant corporations acting against farmers. These were the farmers' own cooperatives acting against the farmers' own financial interests to protect a revenue stream. That is the specific betrayal that your grandfather's generation lived through, and most of them never knew it was happening. There was a man who watched the windmills come down as a boy and spent the next 35 years putting them back up. His name is Dale Schroeder. In 1965, Dale was 8 years old, living on his family's farm in Cherry County, Nebraska, in the heart of the Sand Hills. He remembered the day the cooperative representative came to the farm. He told me, and I want you to hear exactly how he said this. He said, "I remember the man's truck, blue, had the cooperative logo on the door. He sat at our kitchen table for 2 hours. He had brochures. He had a price sheet. He told my father the windmill was unreliable. He told him the electric pump would give him consistent pressure. He told him the cooperative had a special financing program." He paused. Then he said, "My father trusted that man. He was from the cooperative. We were members. We thought it was our organization, so my father signed the paper." Dale watched the windmill come down that fall. He said, "I watched them take it down, and I thought, that windmill has been pumping water since before my father was born, and now it's gone because a man in a blue truck said it was old-fashioned." Dale farmed his family's land for 30 years. In 1987, he found a derelict air-motor windmill in a salvage yard outside of Valentine, Nebraska. He paid $200 for it. He spent 3 weekends rebuilding it in his shop. He put it back up on his property over the well his grandfather had drilled in 1931. He disconnected the electric pump. His water bill that month dropped from $140 to $0. He stood at his stock tank and watched the water run. He thought about the man in the blue truck. He thought about his father signing the paper. He thought about 35 years of electricity bills for water that the wind had always been willing to pump for free. Then he started helping his neighbors do the same thing. I spoke to Dale on a Thursday morning in October. He was in his shop. I could hear metal on metal in the background, a windmill component being worked on. I asked him what the moment felt like when he reconnected that first rebuilt windmill and the water started flowing. He was quiet for a long moment. He said, "I thought about my grandfather. He put that well down in 1931. He put that windmill up to pump it. He never paid a dime for water his entire life. And then one generation later, we were paying $140 a month for the same water out of the same well. And I thought, that is not progress. That is just a very good sales call." Dale has now restored and installed 180 windmills across Cherry County, Brown County, and Rock County in Nebraska. He charges for parts and materials only. His time is free. I asked him why. He said, "Because somebody should have told my father, and nobody did. So I tell people now, that's all." Here's what you need to know about putting a windmill back on your property. The legal framework is straightforward. A farm windmill pumping water from a private well for agricultural or domestic use on the property where it is installed is a mechanical water system, not an electrical system, not a utility connection, and not a regulated appliance. It requires no utility permit, no electrical inspection, and no connection to any grid. In most rural jurisdictions, it requires only a standard building permit for the tower structure, the same permit you would pull for any agricultural structure above a certain height. The permit cost in most rural counties is $50 to $150. That is the entire regulatory requirement. Now here is the practical pathway. New air motor windmills, the American standard since 1888, are still manufactured in San Angelo, Texas. A complete new 8-foot air motor 702 with tower costs approximately $3,200 to $4,500, depending on tower height and shipping. A new electric submersible pump system installed on the same well costs $3,500 to $6,000, plus ongoing electricity costs of $1,200 to $1,800 per year. The windmill costs the same or less to install and nothing to operate. Free. The payback period on the cost difference is 12 to 18 months in electricity savings. Payback. After payback, the water is free for the operational life of the windmill, which, based on Dale's restoration work and the South Dakota State study, is 40 to 80 years with basic annual maintenance. Used and restored windmills are available through farm salvage operations, auction sites, and windmill restoration specialists across the Great Plains for $400 to $1,500, depending on condition and size. Used. Dale's Restoration Guide, which includes inspection criteria for used windmills, parts sourcing, gearbox overhaul procedure, tower erection sequence, and pump cylinder replacement, is linked in the description. The Restoration Guide. The South Dakota State University Extension Windmill Performance Study is also linked. Study. The Air Motor Company Installation and Maintenance Manual, available free on their website, is also linked. Manual. For a farm currently spending $1,400 a year on pump electricity, the payback period on a $4,000 new windmill installation is less than 3 years. Less than 3 years. After that, the water is free every year for the next 60 years.